Folks, welcome back to the podcast. And I'm really glad you've joined me for this particular episode. And hopefully, it'll be helpful for you, particularly those of you that might just be thinking about private practice or just getting started in it. Even for folks that have been in it a while, I think we can always learn from each other as far as different ways to go about what we do in our practices. When I started my practice back in 2006 or 2005, so it's been 20 years, I know. One of the things is that there weren't many resources for private practice owners or people wanting to go into private practice. There were a few books out about it, specifically mental health private practices, but really very few resources out there around that. And of course, now today things have changed a whole lot, and there's a lot of great resources, a lot of great consultants out there. A lot of them are great friends of mine. And so one of the things I love about that community is that there's not really this sense of competition that I perceive, and that we really want to help people build a practice, learn how to do it in a sustainable way, and also in a profitable way. And so they're out there. But again, I'm a consultant as well and work with people on that. But one of the things that I think a mistake I made early on is I tried to make it more complicated than it really was. There's no exact right way to structure your practice or build your practice, but one of the things that I wish I had done was made my systems and processes much simpler. Today, I use therapy notes, which you've heard about on this podcast a lot, for my practice platform, and my particularly the practice platform for the clinical side of things. And I'll distinguish between that in a minute. But yeah, I wish I had done something like that from the get-go rather than trying to bootstrap it and do it all just kind of ad hoc. Actually, when I started private practice, I actually kept paper records from the beginning because there weren't really any platforms that I remember. There were a few out there, but most of them were geared towards medical practices, and it just seemed like they were much more complicated than I wanted to jump into. So I actually kept paper records with file folders and all that sort of thing in the very beginning. Of course, you figure out pretty quickly that you run out of storage space when you do it that way. I'd filled up 2 file cabinets when I moved to my new building, and so it was really, I recognized, okay, this is not a way to do this. But of course, here we are in 2026, and things have changed a lot, and that there's much more stuff available to us as far as keeping our records, keeping things HIPAA secure, all of those kinds of things. So one of the things is I would have gone ahead and purchased a practice management platform like Therapy Notes, and there's several others out there, but I love Therapy Notes. They're a sponsor of this podcast, so I've got to promote them. But yeah, I can really recommend them. I've been very pleased with that, and I had used another system before I started using Therapy Notes, and I'm glad I made the switch. The other system was just not as user friendly, and I didn't realize it at the time. But when I switched over to Therapy Notes, it made things much simpler in the way that we do our intakes, as far as keeping our documentation uh, in check, also insurance billing, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And also just having a patient portal where people can come in and request their own appointments, and it sends out reminders. Also, it handles payment and patient payments, and also files the claims, all of those kinds of things. When I first started, I had none of that. I had separate systems or different things that I would use to collect payments and take credit card payments and that sort of thing. So it's really nice having it all in one place and things being much simpler by doing it that way. Another thing that I would have done differently is that I think it's good to bootstrap in the very beginning when you're starting your practice. In other words, doing it all is what I mean by bootstrapping, as far as answering the phone, setting appointments, of doing your marketing, doing your networking, all of those kinds of things. I was doing it all in the very beginning. The advantage to doing it doing it all in the very beginning. When you're building your practice and when your caseload is small, you've got the time to do that. And then you can put the equity, so to speak, into your practice. And I would recommend doing that. That's what I did. So I wouldn't change that part. But one thing I would change is that I didn't outsource things soon enough. I waited too long to hire a an assistant, as far as like a virtual assistant or a actual person to answer phone calls, set appointments, and do all that front end stuff. One of the things is that I think a lot of people that are new to private practice, when they first start, is that they think, well, nobody else can do it like I want it done. Well, true, they're not going to do it exactly the way you want to do it, but what you might find out is that they could actually do it better, and it frees you up to be able to see clients, and that's where you make money, calling clients back, setting appointments. All those administrative tasks don't really bring any income into you directly. Now, I get it in that you're following up people and building your practice, but really your time is best spent as a practice owner and as a clinician actually seeing clients, and that's where your income comes from. So outsourcing that is sooner rather than later is a smart thing to do. And now with AI, there are ways that you can do that, and it's very cost effective. And really, I don't think it replaces humans, but it really comes close. I want to give a shout out to my good friend Uriah Guilford at Productive Practice, and he's put together a system, an AI system that is just brilliant as far as a good starting place for people when they're first getting started in their practice and want to automate things and have a virtual assistant and that sort of thing. So it's an AI virtual assistant that he's developed. And we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary about that. But yeah, so my point being is that with different things like that, particularly like your intakes and you're having someone to answer the phones and set up appointments and that sort of thing, that's something that's really a low hanging fruit in the very beginning, as far as freeing up your time and being able to make sure that people are being attended to when they call. And so that would be one particular area that I would outsource pretty quickly. Another other areas to think about is, depending on your things like bookkeeping and records management, that kind of thing. Again, you can use a platform for that, like Therapy Notes or some of the others out there. There's Simple Practice. Yeah, you can look it up, but not. But Therapy Notes, I'm really pleased with, and I can recommend it. But also being able to outsource things like your marketing, and being able to outsource things like the building of your website, and putting all those things in place in the beginning are important in maintaining and building your practice. Again, I bootstrapped all that stuff. And part of it was I enjoyed learning all that stuff, learning how to build a website, learning how to do bookkeeping and accounting stuff. All of those things, I was just geeked out on all of those kinds of things, but that might not be for you. But then, so the things that you don't enjoy doing are the things you need to outsource pretty quickly as soon as you can. The other thing, and speaking about the website, one of the things that I would, and I did this as well, is in the early stages, is really put a lot of effort into your website, particularly to begin to get your SEO or search engine optimization up and running well. And the best way to do that is to create a lot of content, a lot of great content. And so that can cover the gambit from doing YouTube videos, creating a podcast, offering workshops. Certainly, blogging is something that is essential for helping a website move up in the rankings so that people can find you. Because when people search you, of course, the algorithms are going to feed to people the things that are most relevant. And so the more that you blog, the more that you put content out there just around different topics like on anxiety or depression or whatever you identify your niche as, it establishes you as an expert in that particular niche or particular area. And so it will bring it up first in people's searches. Sorry, I got tongue tied there. But yeah, so I would do spend a lot of energy on that in the very beginning. The other thing too is I know some folks are built more kind of wired more like me, are typically more introverted, which I'm really kind of in the middle when it comes to testing that stuff. I'm more of what they refer to as an ambivert. I'm kind of right in the middle between being an extrovert and an introvert, but really lean more towards being introverted. But anyway, networking with people and really kind of being out in your community as much as possible helps people to remember you and to refer to you. I mentioned, I think in the intro, or that I'm really not seeing that many clients right now because I'm moving into that time where I'm also retirement's on the horizon, and so I'm figuring that out and gonna, work towards that. But one of the things, as far as the referrals I get personally, since I've been in it so long, most of my referrals come as direct referrals from people that I've either seen in the past or people that I've connected with in the community through churches, through doctors, through different connections within the community. So I would say put a lot of emphasis on that, get out and get to know people. Another consultant that's out there, and a friend of mine is Allison Puryear. And Allison, when she was on this podcast several years ago, talked about when she first moved to a new city. She moved to Asheville, North Carolina. One of the things that she did, set a goal for herself, was to network with one person a day for 90 days. And that was a huge practice builder for her. And so I think that's where you have to start and kind of have the mindset around that of being I like to say being consistent and persistent with those kinds of things are going to pay off in the long run by doing all of those different tasks, as far as putting your putting a lot of emphasis on your SEO and building a lot of content on your website. Also, just networking in the community. Um, the other thing that I would do now is, and I alluded to this already, is take advantage of AI. This is a whole cutting edge area. We could do a whole episode on that, and I've done a few here in the past. I know a lot of us are concerned about AI taking over the counseling and practice counseling and therapy world, but the truth is that it's not going to replace us, I don't think, entirely, because people still crave that human to human touch, that human to human interaction. And so I don't think our professions are going away anytime soon. But being able to use AI to help you come up with a marketing plan, to give you some ideas about your systems and processes, ideas about networking, or any of those kinds of things. You can just plug some stuff in and just yeah, and it gives you all these ideas, and it's really brilliant if you think about it. Also, the other thing that I would do, and again, this is something I did do, but I think a lot of people, and a lot of people I've worked with here in the past, they really struggle in the beginning in going into private practice. And part of it is that they maybe pulled the trigger too soon. In other words, they jumped into private practice without having a good sense of where their referrals are going to be coming from. And so they're putting a lot of effort into building their referral base, and it just creates a lot of stress because until you get up to a certain caseload, your income is not going to be where you need it to be. And so I tell people all the time, don't quit your day job too quickly. And I think it's okay to give yourself permission to maybe do some part-time work. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in the same field. Do something that's going to bring you income in, recognizing that, okay, I'm not going to do this forever, but do something that brings some income in while you build your practice. And I would say too, in your first year, really concentrate on building your reserves. And what I mean by that is you want to create a financial buffer for yourself so that when you reach slow times or times when your caseload drops or you're not getting as many referrals for whatever reason, it could be the holidays, it could be whatever reason, you want to have enough money in reserve to support yourself and pay your bills and that sort of thing to get you through that slump. And that has been something that I did the first year of going into private practice. Was I spent the first year, I still was working, but part of the time I was working for an agency, and then I took on a part-time job with some of my church stuff, and it was enough income to live off of, but it allowed me to take pretty much every bit of the profit I made in my practice and sock it away and I put it into a money market account at the time, just so that money could continue to compound and grow. And really, you want to have at the very least, 3 months of income saved away, income and expenses saved away. 6 months is even better, but have that socked away and just protect that money and only use it when you absolutely have to, as far as either paying yourself or paying your expenses and that sort of thing. And then as soon as you get out of the slump, is put that money back. And so, yeah, so I think that's an essential for anybody in private practice or any small business for that matter. You need to be able to have reserves on hand for those slow times, for the slumps that come along. The other, I'm jumping around and I apologize for that. I mentioned AI, again, taking advantage of that and using those platforms to really be idea generators. They can write a blog for you in no time. And again, that adds to your content creation, all of that sort of thing. The work in doing that is so much easier from when I was in it. When I first started, I was spending hours writing blog posts and putting content out there, and ultimately, it helped me in my practice in the long term. Yeah, so make use of those platforms. The other thing that in hearing from other people out there in those first months or the first year of being in private practice, people do worry about the income coming in. And I would say, um, look at, maybe signing up for some of the um, existing platforms. Now, you have to kind of look at your own kind of moral compass around those and that kind of thing. And certainly, you don't want to do anything against your values. But one of the things I would say is make use of some of those things to create some income for yourself. Now, any of those platforms, and I'm talking about things like BetterHelp, Grow, um, Seven Cups of Tea, or whatever it's called, but any of those platforms that are essentially big investors that have put a lot of money into creating um, platforms for therapists to do therapy on. Um, I'd say maybe sign up for one or two of those so that you start getting some clients and make use of those platforms to bring some income in for yourself. And again, in the first year, take that money and set it aside and put it away while you're building your practice. And then you don't have to stay on those platforms. I mean, you're not obligated to do that. And when you get to a place where you can feel like you're sustaining and you've got a caseload that can be supported, and you can get off of those platforms, because you will make more money charging your own fees rather than depending on what they dictate. So again, in the beginning, if I had to do it overall again, probably would have taken advantage of one of those to just build my caseload and have clients in the very beginning. Um, the other thing that I would say that I would do differently is really kind of weigh the cost benefits of either being self pay or insurance based. Ultimately, I ended up becoming insurance based, and is mainly because of the demographics of my area. And the thing that you have to kind of weigh up against is certainly with being insurance based, you kind of have to take whatever fees they set for you. And the same thing with the platforms that are out there, the tech companies that have gotten into providing platforms for therapists and that sort of thing, where you do online therapy. And again, I'm referring to things like BetterHelp, Grow Therapy, those kinds of things. Um, the thing is that with insurance, you have to accept what fees they offer you in your contract, and you can't charge any more than that. And so they kind of set your fees for you, but the payoff is you don't have to do a lot of marketing by doing that. People, for better or for worse, people will shop therapists based on what insurance they accept. Now, that's where we have to do a better job with educating people about all of that, because I think really we need to pick a person needs to pick a therapist based on their expertise, their niche, somebody that's going to fit well for them. All of those kinds of things are more important than, what the insurance is going to pay for or not. Now I realize there's a lot of people out there that do depend on their insurance. I know I do. When I go to my doctor, I need to have my health insurance in order to pay for that. And so that system is there. It's not going to go away. And so you have to kind of think, do I want to embrace that or not? If you decide to go totally cash pay, you're really going to have to double down on your marketing and really make sure that you're doing those things that I talked about here at the very beginning of this episode of really focusing in on your SEO, your networking, and all of those things to build those referral sources and to so that you stand out not only online but just in your community, and that you become the go-to person for people to refer to. And also, it depending on the populations you want to work with, certainly if you have a calling or a penchant for working with underserved people, which I think we need people like that, you're probably going to want to be on insurance panels rather than be self-pay for your practice. But again, it's not necessarily an easy decision to make, but you can try it. If I were to do it all over again, I would have spent more time doing private pay rather than jumping into insurance, and really spent more time marketing. And then I would probably have later added insurance panels, but been very selective about that, of just picking maybe two or three insurance panels to be on of the insurance companies that where my community is heavily served by those. So, whether it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Cigna, any of those, really doing some research on the front end before you do that of which employers use which insurances. Here where I live, there's a big chemical manufacturing company here. And so I let that be the first one that I signed up for. It was, I think at the time it was Cigna. And so I got on the Cigna panel really from the get go, and it's paid off. And then I get a lot of referrals, or my practice gets a lot of referrals from all of that. So, yeah, pick and choose on that. You can also do a hybrid like I do now. I mean, we accept both cash pay clients and also insurance based clients. And you can do not either or, but certainly a cash based practice is easier on the back end too. You don't have to worry about filing insurance claims or following up with any of that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's just you can decide. I recently had done some consulting with some folks that had started a new practice, and they were going back and forth on that decision. And ultimately, they decided, well, we're going to try to make a go at being self pay. And so they're really doubling down on their efforts with their marketing, getting out in their community and leaving flyers and all of that sort of thing. And hopefully that's going to work for them. But also, they have not taken off the table being on insurance panels, but they're going to do a wait and see on that to see if they want to join any sort of insurance panel. So There's no right or wrong answer to that. You just have to decide what you're willing to do and what you want to do as far as accepting payments or third party payments. Yeah. So I think you have to think about all of that. Let's see, what else was it I was thinking of with things I would have done differently? I mentioned having simpler systems. And so let me backtrack a little bit here and let me explain to you kind of the way I think about the different systems and processes. Really, there's two kind of categories. There's the business side of your practice, all the business systems and processes you would have in place, and then the clinical side of your practice, which is has to do with clients directly. Certainly, the clinical side of your systems and processes, they need to be HIPAA secure and HIPAA compliant, or however you want to term that. And so, again, with platforms like Therapy Notes, that's all built in. And so the way I think about it is that your clinical side of your practice and those systems and processes are very, very client centered. In other words, not Carl Rogers client centered, but very much focused on maintaining the records and everything that you need to know about the individual clients that you have, including what they've paid you or not paid you and what they owe and their billing and all of that sort of thing. So all of that needs to be a separate system. And then you have the business side of your practice. And essentially what you do is take the income that your clinical side has generated, and then you move it over to the business side, and then you have your business systems and processes in place. So it's things like your accounting software, what you pay yourself, any sort of, if you're a group practice, your employees or your contractors, all of the business side that any small business would have is a separate system. And I think it's a good idea to keep those separate and not let them overlap too much. Number one, for HIPAA compliance, but also it just makes it easier in tracking everything. In other words, you want to be able to know, where your income is coming in from, which patients might or clients might owe you something or have insurance that is owed to you, all of those kinds of things. So that's a separate system. The other system, the business system, would be your profit and loss, the income coming into the business. You don't identify specific clients on that side of things. It's just a client income. You keep up with your expenses for running the practice, all of those kinds of things. You need to have a system in place for that. And again, I would recommend that you find a software to do that. Kind of the gold standard for accounting is QuickBooks, although there are a bunch of others out there. There's FreshBooks, there's any number of ways to track that side of things. But I would also, again, this would be something you do in the very beginning, is get an accountant that you trust and somebody that you can work for, and listen to their recommendations on that about how you want to track all of the business side of doing things. And so that would be something I would really encourage you to do in just thinking about all of that. And so keeping those separate. The other thing that I would do, and I'm not even sure if this concept was around when I first started, but I would learn profit first. Mike Michalowicz, who I've had on this podcast, created a system called Profit First. And then my good friend Julie Harris at Green Oak Accounting has written another book specifically for therapists. So shout out to Julie and her book, Profit First for Therapists. Get that book, learn that system. Because when I did that, all of a sudden, kind of the light bulb went off, and running the business side of the practice became much, much more easy and much simpler by learning that. So in the very beginning, learn that system. And I would say I didn't necessarily do it this way, but I would say adopt that system with the different bank accounts and all of that sort of thing, and really kind of follow it as closely as possible. And it'll make a huge difference for you in your practice and being able to making sure that your practice is sustainable, that you're paying yourself enough. And when you bring on other clinicians as employees or contractors, making sure that you're paying them an amount that's sustainable. When I first started a group practice, again, a mistake I learned from is I was paying my people too much. And it was because I just kind of picked a random percentage that I was going to pay them out of what was coming in. And it was way too high. And so I had to backtrack. And I lost a few people in my practice because of that. But I also, once I switched over from a contractor model to an employee model, all of a sudden I became more profitable just because of the different write-offs and all of that sort of thing, which we could do again a whole episode on that, and I'm sure I've got some out there already with that. Being able to adopt the profit first system and that philosophy early on would be something I would do now that I didn't do back then. So I think that's about it on my list for today. I jotted down some things. Just a quick review is make your system simple. Don't try to create a whole lot of bells and whistles around that. Outsource as soon as you start getting busy, particularly the having an intake coordinator or having someone that manages your intakes, whether it's an AI assistant, a virtual assistant, or an actual person in your office. I would do that. That would be one of the first systems I would put into place. Also, just spending a lot of time in the beginning when you've got the time of creating a lot of content to put out there on your website and on the internet so that you're establishing yourself as an expert in our field and also making the search engines find you just by having a lot of content there and focusing on the different SEO things like backlinks and all of that kind of stuff with your website. Also, networking in the community, making those contacts so that you've got a lot of referrals coming in from multiple different sources and different ways rather than putting your eggs all in one basket. Also, taking advantage of AI to write your blogs and all of that kind of stuff would be something I would recommend. Also, making use in the beginning stages of those existing platforms like BetterHelp, Seven Cups of Tea, Grow Therapy, all of those different ones, Alma, Headway, those kinds of things. Make use of those platforms in the very beginning while you're building your practice and particularly building your reserves. Use those platforms to help you build your reserves. So that would be something that I would recommend in the beginning. And again, building those reserves is important in the beginning and concentrating on that and getting 3 to 6 months of money saved away so that if you reach a slow period, you've got that saved away. And then finally, learning the profit first system. So hopefully this has been a helpful episode for you and things to think about. Thanks for joining.